welcome everybody. So this is the Nudnicks panel, and what we're doing here is we are... What? Hello? This is the Nudnicks panel, and the idea here is that we are voting for the greatest Nudnick in history. So this is a person who possibly unwillingly has caused the downfall or disasters in history. And so what we'll be doing, the idea is that we are all aboard a balloon which is plummeting towards the earth, and we need to jettison somebody to lose weight to save ourselves. And so the idea is that once our panelists have presented their particular Nudnick, we will perform a vote, and the person with the most votes will be jettisoned. So here we go. And I would like to invite Jenny and Jen of the Ancient Fangirls History Podcast to present their Nudnick.
Okay, hi. We're so glad to be here.
We're super excited. We have one of our favorite people who we're here to present to you today. He gets a lot of love in history, but today we're going to show you the real man behind the legend. And our man is Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's right-hand man. He was, in his life, a total war elephant. He was the guy you let loose in a dangerous situation when you wanted things to get completely out of hand and quickly. But when he had to make decisions for himself, things didn't go so great.
So early in his career, when Julius Caesar was still alive, Julius Caesar used to leave him in charge to keep the peace, shall we say, in Rome. And usually that involved riding around in a chariot pulled by lions, sleeping with other men's wives, and barfing in the Senate house.
That went about as well as you would imagine that would go, right?
Yeah.
Other times it involved starting violent gang wars. I kid you not. Like the time when there was a debt crisis and Mark Antony started a gang war that killed 800 people. Ostensibly, Mark Antony went to war over the debt crisis because this guy on the other side slept with his wife. Yeah.
But when he was supposed to be planning and gathering resources to attack Persia, Mark Antony fucked and drank and partied his way across Asia, leveraging enormous payments, drinking the entire open bar, sleeping with other men's wives, and getting drunk in a tent pretending to be Dionysus.
He was going to Parthia. When he went to Parthia, the entire campaign was a catastrophe. He abandoned his siege engines to move fast in rugged territory and totally lost all of his siege engines. I mean, don't abandon your siege engines in unfamiliar territory. 101.
Spent weeks chasing Parthian horse archers who lured people into deserts and ambushes.
He listened to Parthian guides who led his army into traps.
Ran out of supplies, so his troops starved, drank contaminated water, and went mad.
He abandoned key supplies for speed, including grinders to grind grain. So when his soldiers were actually able to forage for grain, they couldn't eat it because they couldn't grind it.
He sent a different general 2 years earlier to beat up on the Parthians for him, and he still humiliated himself.
And eventually, Mark Antony washed up on a beach somewhere with more than half of his army dead. And Cleopatra, good Cleopatra, came along to pat Mark Antony on the head and go, there, I'll sort it for you.
But wait, there is more. Did we tell you about the time Mark Antony pieced out to Egypt to have a long, hot summer with Cleo, abandoned his interest in Rome, left his wife, the amazing Fulvia, fighting his battles, who worked hard to protect his interests against Octavian, and Mark Antony threw her to the wolves. Mark had to marry Octavian's sister to patch things up.
But wait, Mark can't keep his dick in his pants. Antony eventually cheated on Octavia, publicly humiliated her in favor of Cleopatra. And this was all the pretense that Octavian needed for a war. Though to be fair, Antony did a ton of other things that made him look terrible to the Roman public. And if you need more, ask us about the Battle of Actium.
Yeah,
was the soldier, but he abandoned his men at the Battle of Actium. He went off-brand, and that was completely unforgivable. Mark Antony made his reputation by sleeping in the ditches and being one of the soldiers' men, and he abandoned them.
Yeah, I would say the going off-brand was possibly what killed the Roman Republic. Maybe. I mean, you could make that claim.
And to the person he said he trusted Cleopatra and then she buggered off in the middle of a battle of Actium, wait for our presentation. That's not what happened. That's not what you do when you have a ship with loads and loads of rows of oars.
I think we're done. Are we done?
Sure.
I think that's about it.
Well, thank you very much, Jen and Jenny. The Mark Antony is definitely a good candidate for Nudnick to be jettisoned. But let's hear from Rick and Anton.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so Anton, when I was your age, when I was 13, do you think you were cleverer than I was when I was your age?
100%.
Well, that isn't actually my fault, because back then we still had lead in petrol, or that's gasoline for people who drive on the wrong side of the road. Because did you know, at its height, lead in petrol might have actually caused a 6% drop in the IQ of people who were exposed to it. So I actually lived in really scary times.
Thankfully, you're too stupid to notice.
Thank you, Anton. So leaded petrol was invented in the 1920s by our Nudnick, Thomas Midgley Jr., as a solution for engine knocking. Now,
What is engine knocking?
well, that's a great question, Anton, because engine knocking, it's the way a combustion engine works is fuel and air are ignited, and this causes lots of little explosions in the engine, and they produce the mechanical movement that actually powers the engine. Now, engine knocking occurs when there are extra uncontrolled explosions, and they can cause really serious damage. But luckily, Midgley Jr. was a really, really clever man, and he discovered that just by adding triethyl lead to fuel mixture, you would save engines.
But unfortunately, he didn't discover it also polluted air, soil, and water, caused numerous health issues, and was potentially the downfall of the human race.
No, and it would take absolutely decades to realise that. So just imagine a world where we actually all became too stupid to discover what was making us stupid. I think we had a really lucky escape here.
I can't imagine him doing anything worse than that, surely.
Anton, you poor innocent child. Have you not heard of the hole in the ozone layer? When I was your age, just 13, it was the end of the world.
What?
Like I said, I lived in really scary times. So you know how we have lovely fresh food, thanks to refrigeration?
Yeah.
Probably one of the best inventions of the modern age.
Yeah.
That was also thanks to Thomas Midgley Jr. And he developed chlorofluorocarbons, aka CFCs. Now, CFCs, they are absolutely fantastic. They're non-toxic, they're non-flammable, and they allowed the refrigeration revolution.
Cool.
Yes, they were.
I didn't mean it like that.
Actually, no, sorry. They weren't cool. They're far from it. These CFCs, they were used in fridges, solvents, aerosol cans, and loads of other really useful things. But when they escape into the atmosphere, they rise up into the stratosphere. They're not there. The chlorine atoms separate from them. Those react to the ozone, causing a big hole to appear. And this is really bad, as you know, Anton, the ozone layer protects us from the sun's deadly UV radiation, which would cook us and our planet.
So he wasn't content with trying to destroy the world once.
No. And for me, at your age, it felt like every week the news was saying that the hole in the ozone layer was getting bigger. We're all going to get skin cancer. The South Pole was going to melt. Sea levels were going to rise, and the end was nigh.
He'd clearly lost 6% of his IQ to leaded petrol.
Yes, but thankfully, the world came together and CFCs were banned in 1987. But it's quite a sad story because Thomas Midgley Jr., he actually tried his best to make the world a better place. And his inventions made possible two of the greatest advancements of the 20th century, like the motor car and the freedom it gives, and refrigeration. But he was also, as new scientists rate, a one-man environmental disaster. And it's estimated that he's probably indirectly responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people and speeding up global warming.
I think we should toss him out the balloon.
And that's our talk, or our Nudnick.
Classic Nudnick behaviour, that, you know, trying for the best and killing 100 million people. Yeah, to go see what we've got coming up from David. So presumably a French Nudnick, Nudnick peut-être.
Oui, bien sûr. I'm here to talk to you about the true greatest Nudnick of history. Now, I have known about this panel for months, and I've done almost nothing to prepare for it. which gives me a lot in common with the man I'm here to talk to you about today. Jules de Polignac, for those of you who may not know, and by the way, I'm going to get into spoilers for the narrative of the siècle here, so you've been warned. He was the prime minister appointed by Charles X of France, who is most famous for the prime minister who got kicked out of his reign by the July Revolution in 1830. And that was mostly Polignac's fault. Jules de Polignac has this truly impressive combination of bad ideas and incompetent execution. So the harder he tried to accomplish the things that he believed in all his heart were necessary for France, the harder he tried to achieve them, the more he damaged his own cause. It's truly impressive how counterproductive he was at everything he tried to do in his life. When he was a young man, he went out to try to assassinate Napoleon. He failed. Napoleon could have executed him, but left him alive, presumably on the assumption that he was did more harm to the Bourbon dynasty alive than dead. Later on, when the Bourbons did get restored, no thanks to Polignac, Polignac promptly managed to alienate 90% of the French political community by adopting the most reactionary positions possible that even many other royalists thought were out of line. He was appointed ambassador to London, where his primary claim to fame is getting called into a meeting and bullied into abandoning the entire French foreign policy by the British Foreign Minister George Canning. And then he got appointed Prime Minister of France, which, as I said in my podcast, made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. And you were, by the way, going to have to vote to throw Jules de Polignac out of this balloon, because he is certainly not going to have the sense to go on his own. He stuck around even though, as I said, 90% of the French political establishment thought he was a bad idea, including a ton of people who agreed with him on all the important issues. They just saw that he was truly incompetent and was going to destroy everything he believed in, which he did. He failed to work with the French opposition in Parliament. He failed to effectively plan for a coup to remove the French opposition in Parliament. So that when he finally did this, after almost a year of delays, the opposition was stronger than ever. He failed to alert the French military that he was about to launch a coup, and just completely took no preparations, anticipated no opposition. And when the July Revolution chased him and Charles out of town, he still truly failed to understand what he had done and why it had happened. There's a story, probably false, that Jules de Polignac believed that the Virgin Mary would talk with him in his sleep and give him advice. This appears to be made up, but in fact, we sort of know it was made up because if the Virgin Mary had been giving him advice, then surely he would have managed to actually make a good decision at some point in his life.
Yep, there's another good one. So, Jules, I don't know how we're spelling that. Could you put that in the chat? I was trying to get together. So now we will be moving on to Benjamin, and this is where I first heard of what a Nudnick was from Benjamin. So please take it away, Ben. You're on mute. Unmute yourself and then take it away, Ben.
Good call. Yeah.
Nudnick. So.
Emperor Berengar of Italy had a 50-year political career, and during that time he took the Kingdom of Italy from being the jewel in the crown of the Carolingian Empire to being a nearly ungovernable disaster area, beset by pirates on every coastline, with Magyar horsemen plundering the countryside, and with his government having sold off every conceivable power to private interests as a short-term fundraising scheme. In a context of total social collapse, facing numerous invasions, Berengar never won a pitched battle despite fighting in many. On several occasions, he escaped a disastrous battle by hiding under piles of corpses. Despite his glorious lack of performance, he clung to power until the day his own retainers killed him. To be fair to Berengar, there's some context to take into account here. He rose to prominence in Italy during the reign of Emperor Charles the Fat, the last emperor of the entire Carolingian Empire, and himself notoriously ineffective. He performed several services while serving his cousin, such as the time where he almost brought a wayward Duke Guy of Spoleto to justice, only to have his army destroyed by a plague. Or there was the time he lost a war with a bishop. But then Charles died, and in the charming words of Reggio of Plume, every kingdom in the empire selected a king from within their own bowels. Berengar, who had been something of a court favorite of Charles, initially thought that he was shoo-in for King of Italy. The only man strong enough to oppose him, Duke Guy of Spoleto, had gone north to try and get the crown of West Francia. So Berengar had himself crowned and started doing king-type things, when who walks back into Italy but Guy of Spoleto? You know, the whole King of France thing hadn't worked out, so he came back to Italy. And immediately, half of Berengar's supporters deserted him and flocked to Guy of Spoleto. They fought a battle, which ended in a draw, at which point the kingdom was invaded by Arnulf of Germany. Berengar said something along the lines of, "King? Oh, I'm not king. You're looking for Guy of Spoleto. He's just down the road that way." And he hid for a while. Berengar did pretty well out of this alliance with Arnulf until he inexplicably betrayed him and was removed from power. This didn't last. He was soon able to use his local support to outmaneuver Arnulf's representatives in Italy, but then had to fight Guy of Spoleto's son, Lambert the Rage. Lambert beat Berengar and took him captive, but then died mysteriously a few days later. So Berengar just walked out of prison, retook what was left of his army and the army of the kingdom, and reinstalled himself as the king of northern Italy again. He was just settling in when he received word that horrible Magyar nomads were invading Italy from what is now Croatia. Berengar went to drive them off, and his army was horribly destroyed, likely due to his own tactical blunders. He only survived by hiding under the bodies of his men. The nobility of Italy was now getting a little wary of this king, who didn't seem capable of winning things, and so they invited in Louis of Provence to be the new king. Berengar does seem to have been able to defeat Louis twice, but both times there was a heavy dose of failed political intrigue going on, so it wasn't exactly a straight fight. The second time Louis was defeated, it was like him and 10 guys in a church surrounded by Berengar's entire army. Anyway, then the Magyars attacked again and besieged a city. They were bought off, and then Berengar sold the rule of the city to the bishop if the bishop promised to repair the walls for him, and then he went away. With this spectacular track record in mind, it was now that the Pope crowned Berengar emperor, on Berengar's promise of sending troops to help the Pope drive off the Saracen pirates that were taking over southern Italy. Berengar was indeed crowned, but then turned around and said he didn't actually have any troops to spare. He ordered the new ruler of Spoleto to help out and then legged it back to northern Italy, where he said the Magyars were threatening him again. With nobles of dubious loyalty and having given away even the rights to collect tolls at individual bridges, Berengar decided to make some changes. First, he accused his wife of infidelity and had her poisoned. Second, he decided that these Magyars were pretty good at the whole war thing, and if he just paid them to fight for him, not only wouldn't he have to fight them, he also wouldn't have to give away any lands or rights to nobles. So he invited in the ill-disciplined bands of uncivilized raiders to be his new army now. The nobles didn't like this, so they invited in Randolph of Burgundy to be their new king. Things were so bad that even his own grandson rose up against him. At this point, the Magyars saw which way the wind was blowing, and just started pillaging and looting the countryside before they went home. Berengar tried to flee back to his own lands to stage yet another comeback, but his retainers had had enough by this point, and they put him out of everyone else's misery. Now, to be fair to Berengar, this was not a great time to be king of anything. The Saracen and Magyar raids were a wider problem in Europe, and the utter collapse of the Carolingian Empire was a tough place to start. Many of the kings in Europe did things like buy off raiders, hire them as mercenaries, or give away crowned lands to buy loyalty. This is basically where feudalism comes from. But none of the other kings seemed so desperately inept, and yet so inexplicably lucky as Berengar. Someone must have liked him, because he did keep staging comebacks, but the wider nobility clearly would have preferred anyone else as king, and they were constantly deserting him. I do wish we had more details about this guy, something to give us some understanding of his personality that might explain his career in any way that makes sense, but alas, we are left with just his inexplicable record of failing upwards harder than anyone else in early medieval Europe. In the process, he dismantled the central government of the Kingdom of Italy, destroyed its army, subjected the countryside to repeated pillaging by various raiders, and betrayed Arnulf for apparently no reason, poisoned his own wife, and humiliated himself repeatedly. And so, I submit to you, Berengar I of Italy, the biggest Nudnick in history.
Yeah, going to be hard to beat that one. But I think we have a Persian Nudnick coming up from Trevor. So fire away, Trevor.
All right. So we have had people involved in the heights of their nation's politics or world-changing technologies. So I humbly submit a prince of Persia, who you have probably never heard of, as the Nudnick we need to get off of this flight. This is Prince Darius, the eldest son of the great king Artaxerxes II. And there is a good reason you've never heard of him. Darius only shows up in the historical record around the age of 50, which is already not a great sign for somebody whose job description is be good at politics and war during the most chaotic, war-filled point in his empire's history. He fell victim to the worst thing that can befall a prince. His dad lasted to a ripe old age in his late 80s or early 90s. So don't go imagining a young, dashing prince. Darius was roughly the same age as his uncle, Cyrus the Younger, because there's a 20-year age gap between Artaxerxes and Cyrus. And he didn't have tons of memories of Cyrus because his uncle had staged a very famous revolt around the age of 20. That's the story of Xenophon and the 10,000 Greek mercenaries. But that was also when Darius was introduced to Aspasia the Wise, one of Cyrus's concubines who became one of Artaxerxes II's concubines after Cyrus was defeated. And the reason for that is if a member of the nobility has fraternized with someone of the opposite sex in any way, there is a chance that they could be carrying their child. And that means that that could be a potential heir to that bloodline. This becomes important later because a couple decades down the line, Artaxerxes II needs to choose an heir formally before he dies, and he goes to pick Darius. Darius gets to ask one present from his father, and he asks for Aspasia, which is tantamount to admitting to an affair with this woman who is roughly the same age as him, and supposedly has been bearing his father's children. If any of Artaxerxes' children are called into question, all of them can be called into question, which prompts the potential for civil war. Not wanting to make a scene, Artaxerxes officially grants the request and then quietly sends Aspasia off to become a priestess. Darius gets mopey about that, goes to a disgraced noble living at court named Tiribazus, and Tiribazus starts feeding him all these ideas of, you know, how could you really expect people to trust you as king if you can't even let your father, or if your father keeps lording things over you like this? So the two of them get to planning of a way to expedite Artaxerxes II's old age just a bit. Except they're not very good at planning assassinations because some servants overhear them and rat them out to Artaxerxes. The king lays in bed at night, waiting for someone to enter his chambers, and when Tiribazus and Darius walk in, Artaxerxes jumps up, runs to another room, and they get taken by the guards. This leads to a trial, and eventually Darius's and all of his own sons' executions, which opens the door to have Artaxerxes choose a new heir. And that leads to a series of assassinations of Darius's younger brothers until the most violent and militant of his brothers, named Ochus, is the last one standing. He becomes King Artaxerxes III, and most of Artaxerxes III's hyper-militant policies lead to pulling resources out of Anatolia and laying the groundwork for the Macedonians to invade a generation later, which in turn plunges the entire Near Eastern world into about 200 years of nonstop warfare and things like the Sixth Syrian War. Sixth. So all because Darius couldn't just quietly continue an affair and had to go in the most public fashion possible, try and get it out in the open, and because he couldn't even kill a sleeping old man properly. He doomed his entire empire and the rest of his civilization to a dark age of about 300 to 400 years of intermittent bickering kings and squabbling minor powers. Get Darius off of this balloon.
Excellent. That was fantastic. So does anybody have any questions if you're sort of still in doubt about who you're going to be voting for? Does anyone have any questions? I think we had something about the did Midgley set up Union Carbide? Do you know anything about that, Rick?
I did a very quick bit of research now.
Yeah.
And possibly.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure. I seem to remember hearing that come up somewhere. So let's say for the sake of argument that yes, he definitely did. And he should definitely be thrown off this balloon.
Is that a bad thing to have set up Union Carbide? Are they?
It is now.
It is now, yeah. That's Anton's research task.
Right. Well, apparently, according to Bill Bryson, he did. So, I mean, if Bill Bryson says so, who are we to argue? Trevor,
yes,
have you?
Let's go with him. Yeah.
Oh, just on the subject of Union Carbide, they're responsible for the largest industrial disasters in history in both the US and India.
Oh, right. They did that one in India. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not great.
So that's destroying the world 3 or 4 times then, not just twice. He tried.
What a hero.
Yeah, but he had good things too.
Such
Maybe
as?
Nudnick if you enabled the two breakthrough refrigeration. Come on. He's earned his spot in a balloon for that.
He killed 100 million people at least.
Yeah, the wrong form of refrigeration this was.
Right, so let's get your voting hats on. So please in the chat put the name of who you're voting for, and just to remind you, we've got Mark Antony of Caesar fame and Actium, etc. We've got Thomas Midgley Jr., Union Carbide, CFC's lead in petrol. Gilles de Polignac of not quite killing Napoleon. We've got the original Nudnick, Berengar. What year was Berengar, more or less, Ben, actually? You're on mute. What sort of...
I don't remember when he was born. I know he was deposed and killed in around 927.
Right, cool. And then finally, we've got Darius from Persia. So please vote away. Thomas. Yeah, Thomas is getting... It's much like Eurovision. Yeah, looks like, yes, Thomas is definitely, I'm afraid, is coming in with Berengar. A late vote for Berengar. Mark Antony's idea of keeping the beef was bluffing in the Senate House and started gang wars. And Jen's not going to take this lying down. Right. Yes, that's a pretty big one. Responsible for the end of the Roman Republic. Yeah, that's pretty major. Any last minute votes for Mark Antony? That's so true. I mean, we've just heard about Henry VIII. Keeping it in their pants in general would help. But his music box. Yes, I don't get the music references. What is there a musician called Mark Antony? This is me being ancient again.
From the 1990s, I believe.
Oh, right. I was alive then. I was even quite young then. Right, so I'm afraid that right. Jennifer Lopez. Heard of her. Cool. But not quite the Cleopatra Mark Antony fame or power couple. So it's looking like the vote is going for Thomas Midgley Jr. with the CFCs and the lead in the petrol. And congratulations. I think is that 2 years in a row that you've won the balloon debate, Rick and Anton?
I think last year might have been a draw or something. I can't remember
Yes, I
exactly.
think, yeah.
So long ago. Thank you very much.
So long
everyone.
ago. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was fantastic. Well done, everybody. And join us for more fun and games as we go along. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye.